And welcome in, Draft Nicks. Time to talk baseball. Yeah, late October, and we're talking baseball, the latest edition of Real Baseball Talk with my guests, Claudio Reilsono and John Perrotto, here to get you ready for what really should be an epic World Series based on reputation alone. Gentlemen, thanks for going on the clock with Draft Nation in the latest edition of Real Baseball Talk. Let's start here. This is the 12th World Series meeting between the Yankees and the Dodgers. This will be, though, just the fifth, I believe, between the Yankees and Dodgers is bi-coastal opponents, right? The first seven happened between New York and Brooklyn way back in the day. The first, though, since 1981. So we think of the Yankees and Dodgers. We think of both of them spending a ton of money, being perennial contenders. Yet this is the first time in 43 years they've met in the World Series. Before we get into how these teams were constructed or what we expect to happen over the next week and a half in up to 7 games of this series, let's start with a guy who was integral in the last time these two teams met. Claudio, I'll start with you. Just remembrances of Fernando Valenzuela, who passed away this past week, just 10 days shy of his 64th birthday. Fernando Mania swept baseball in the early 80s. He won Rookie of the Year and Cy Young that 81 season when he also started, I believe it was Game 3 of that World Series for the Dodgers against the Yankees. Just remembrances of Fernando.
Well, guys like Fernando Valenzuela, Mark the Bird Fidrich, you got to remember, they blew up without social media, without ESPN and all the coverage. We used to have the 3 stations back then, and of course the newspapers and the radio, and they just blew up, and they had an it factor, a personality, not necessarily so much for Fernando verbally, but just his look, the eyes up in the air, his approach, the way he played, and of course Tommy Lasorda, the way he would promote him, and he backed it up. He was a hell of a pitcher. I say back then, and Chris, as you get to know me, I'm an old school guy. 70s, 80s is when I grew up. Those guys would be illegal today. They would have dominated the hitters today. We'll get into that later. But, he was so important for baseball through his career, and just a legendary figure. And there's even talk about him maybe entering the Hall of Fame as not just a player, but as a contributor. So he was kind of a crossover guy. And it was so sad to see that he passed away. I knew he was sick, but just an absolute legend. And he's one of those guys, when you say one name, Reggie, Pele, Cher, Madonna, Fernando.
Yeah, John, Claudio talks about just the style, the way he threw. There was, I don't know if it was that Game 3 of the 81 World Series or not, but he had many instances where he would throw complete games and, maybe not walk away with a win even, right? He'd throw 145 pitches or something, and that was just the way it was done back then. Plus, you add in, all the stress and torque on the arm. He was throwing that screwball. Definitely the last one of a breed who we don't see much of anymore.
No, you really don't. And, you think back on that Game 3 of the 81 World Series, and he threw 147 pitches, and he walked 7 guys. And, you laugh now. You look at the postseason, not to sound like an old man yelling at the clouds, as I always tell Claudio. But if he gave up 4 runs in the first 2 innings of that game, he would have been out. He never would have had a chance to get to the 3rd inning, let alone the 9th. But, when I think of Fernando, too, not only the great pitcher like Claudio covered, but a real cultural icon, especially in Los Angeles with the large Mexican-American and a large Latino population in general. And he was the first Latino superstar that the Dodgers had after they moved from Brooklyn out to Los Angeles in 1958. And he not only caught, Anglo fans by storm, but a lot of Latin American and a lot of Mexican American people who weren't even baseball fans, that didn't really even follow baseball, became big Dodger fans because of Fernando's success. And I think a lot of the success you can tie from the Dodgers today, you can tie back to them because they draw $4 million a year now. And part of the reason they do is because they have such a big Latino audience. I've read where like 40% of their fans, their ticket buyers, are of Latin American heritage. So I think he made a huge impact on that franchise on the field and probably even more off the field.
Yeah, as someone who sat out in the bleachers at Dodger Stadium and enjoyed a Dodger dog on a Sunday afternoon, you're right. There is a close attachment between the Mexican American community in Southern California and Dodgers fandom. Los Dodgers, as a lot of people call them out there in Southern California. Fernando, a big part of that. John Perrotto of Pittsburgh Baseball Now and Baseball Digest, as well as doing great work here at Draft Nation, has a couple of pieces up right now on how these two teams were built, the Dodgers and the Yankees. Claudio, obviously, you know plenty about building teams with Global Scouting Bureau and as the head coach at Carnegie Mellon. I'll ask you, we get caught up, I think, because it's the Yankees and the Dodgers, looking at the construction of these rosters and saying, oh, they spent $250 million on this and that and Ohtani and, the trade for Soto in the offseason by the Yankees. And, they both have payrolls up around and over $300 million this year. Let's strip all the financials away from it for just a second, Claudio, and just talk about the build of these teams. You still do have some homegrown players on either side. I see a Walker Buehler resurgence this fall. That's a homegrown guy. I see Aaron Judge. That's a homegrown guy. So when you're looking at how you put teams together, how important is it to have guys who, I guess, are a part of the fabric, whether it's at the collegiate level, a part of the fabric of the program, or part of a fabric of a clubhouse, and that they've come up through that system?
Great question. The old real estate axiom is what? The three most important things in real estate are good location, good location, good location. I used to say the three most important things in coaching and business and life were good people, good people, good people. I've changed that. The three most important things in coaching, business, sports, and life is the right people, the right people, the right people. You have to have the right people who, another thing that I always say is you have to pull the same rope at the same time, the same direction for the same purpose to get a great result. Using basketball as an analogy, one of my favorite teams growing up were the mid-70s 76ers, when they had George McGinnis and Dr. J and Doug Collins and World B. Free and Steve Mix and Caldwell Jones, then Daryl Dawkins. And then they got close, but they couldn't win. Then they got two missing pieces, Bobby Jones and Moses Malone. And they won a championship. So you have to have the right people. There's different philosophies. There's the Florida Marlins philosophy. Let's get free agents, win, blow it up. Free agents, win, blow it up. Or you have the philosophy, and I think the Yankees and the Dodgers both are they're criticized a little bit too much by people saying they bought their way to a championship, to a pennant. I don't necessarily agree with that. There's a good mix. There's some free agents, and there's some homegrown people. I think the Pirates are doing the best job of anybody in baseball. I'm kidding. Whatever that is. But again, I think both of them get a little bit criticized, a little bit too much yes, they got Freeman, they got some free agents, they made some trades. You have to have a good mix of the right people. And even though, for example, the Oakland A's of the early 70s or the Yankees, what do you think about? A lot of fights, a lot of arguing. But when it came time, when those lights were on, you had the right people. And last thing, not only do you need the stars, and we're going to cover this a little bit today, not only do you need the stars, the Stantons and the Judges, but you also need the guys who I always say who are pole to pole, the guy who slapped the ball, the guy who will get on base, the guy who will be a pain on the base paths, the guys like a Soto who will fight on an at bat. Not just the sluggers, not just the major stars, even though Soto is that. The Scott Brosius, the Denny Doyles, the Bernie Carbos, the Tim Foley's, Phil Garners, the guys who maybe don't get the headlines, but at the end of the day, the Charlie Hayes, I can go on and on, World Series, Bucky Dent, those guys were huge contributors to a team winning the World Series.
John, as for the actual buildup of these rosters, you can see, I don't think it's any more personified or any more on display than when you look at the starting rotations for this series, most likely. In the Yankees, you've got Cole, big money free agent. Rodon, big money free agent. And then in the 3 spot, Clark Schmidt, homegrown guy, right? For the Dodgers, it really runs the gamut. Jack Flaherty will start game 1, big trade deadline acquisition. Game 2 will be Yamamoto, big free agency signing. And then they haven't listed him yet, but I would imagine Walker Buehler in game 3, another homegrown talent, as I mentioned earlier. 13 combined players between 52 on the 2 rosters who are homegrown would indicate that they have gone out. Like Claudio said, people stick to this cliche that they have gone out and bought this team. But you do see that some of the most important players on both sides are the Aaron Judges, the homegrown players, the Walker Buehlers.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, obviously the Yankees and Dodgers are the 2 most valuable, the 2 most highly valued franchise from a financial standpoint in baseball. And they're going to use that money and their financial clout to sign free agents. But, before I get into each team's homegrown guys, what the Yankees and Dodgers do well too, and this is also what part of your farm system's for, is they've used a lot of their prospects to get big league players, and not like average or fringe big league players. I mean, big time big league players they've used to trade, like when the Yankees got Giancarlo Stanton, when the Dodgers got Mookie Betts a few years ago. But you look at the Yankees, and I know when I've talked to Brian Cashman, their general manager, in the past, it really burns him when they say, well, the Yankees have bought all their pennants. And maybe to an extent they have, but you look at this roster, they have 4 first-round picks, and they're all pivotal players. You have, obviously, Aaron Judge. Of course, he went to free agency, and the Yankees paid $360 million to bring him back. But you have a couple – the other guys, Clark Schmidt, who you mentioned reference to, will pitch game 3. He's only making $2.03 million. He was arbitration eligible for the first time last year. And then you have 2 other starters, and Austin Wells, the catcher, and shortstop Anthony Volpe. Wells is a rookie, Volpe just finishing up his second year. Those guys are making under $1 million. So, they have made good use of the farm system, both for trades and for key players. And the Dodgers have 3 number 1 picks on their team, and they're all key players. Walker Buehler was the number 1. Gavin Lux, the second baseman, who had an okay year. He probably hasn't living up to the great hype that surrounded him coming up through the Dodger system, but he's still a solid big league player. And then Will Smith, the catcher, who is, he has his issues defensively at times, but he is a good hitter, one of the better hitting catchers in baseball. And the Dodgers saw enough of him to sign him to a 10-year, $130 million contract early in the season. So both teams do have some homegrown players. And the other thing I like with the roster construction with both teams is, bullpens have become so important in baseball, and especially in the postseason when, we talked about earlier, going to the bullpen in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th inning, or even having bullpen games. The Dodgers and Yankees, for all the money they spent, if you look at some of their relievers, they haven't spent a whole lot of money. They have guys making right around the minimum of $750. They've claimed guys off waivers, like the Yankees closer Luke Weaver. He was a waiver claim 2 years ago. So not only are they good at trading and getting free agents, but they're pretty good, both teams. And I think they're both underestimated in how well they are at finding the players on the fringe that can become contributors too.
Claudio, we've got a couple of interesting managers in this matchup, too, in Dave Roberts on one side and Aaron Boone on the other. And, John talked about it. The bullpens are going to figure into this. It's just the way October baseball is played now, whether we like it or not. You're going to get 4 or 5 arms out of the bullpen, at least on each side during each game. What do you think about the managing matchup here and the spot where managers' impact is most often felt? And that's the usage of the bullpens. 2 bullpens that have had some ups and downs this year, but they come into the World Series maybe trying to dial in on some things and not, overmanage or overuse those bullpens.
Exactly. And sometimes, this is a controversial thing. A lot of these managers today, when they get into their office, the lineup is already made out for them. They're told who to pitch. Like, remember Blake Snell a few years ago. Well, after and after 75 pitches, he starts to fade. Well, he wasn't fading then, and they take him out. Unbelievable. And when they took him out, the Dodgers just, wow, they took him out. They were so glad. Don't do that. Don't do. Each game is its own entity. Don't worry about tomorrow. Jim Valvano used to say, survive in advance. Don't worry about developing any kind of consistency. Just let's win the game. Let's survive today and advance to tomorrow. Whatever you have to do to win this game today, let's do it. Don't. And another thing, if the starting pitch, you just said it, with this bringing in the bullpen and all that, years ago when Tony La Russa started it pretty much, he had to. But because the starting pitchers, but he also had the horses to do it. Yes, he had the Stewart and Morgan and those guys as starting pitchers, but then he had Honeycutt and Gene Nelson, and then he had some guy named Eckersley closing. The Yankees, they had their starting pitching, but then they had another guy named Nelson and Rivera to bring to Wetland. Then later on, they had Mariano Rivera. You had the horses to do it. Now, neither bullpen, in my opinion, is a stellar bullpen. Okay. And I think the Dodgers, their bullpen ERA against Cleveland, against the Mets was 3.5, something like that. Of course, the starting pitching for the Dodgers was 6. But if somebody's doing well, Flaherty, Buehler, whoever, Yamamoto, don't just take them out. Let them keep going. And whoever is hot, even if it's a bullpen guy, if you bring a bullpen guy in the 5th, okay, I was watching the 73 World Series. Raleigh Fingers came in. I think it was 72 World Series. He came in like in the 73, 72, whatever. He came in the 5th inning. Okay, because they wanted to win that game. Don't worry about tomorrow. Whoever is hot, you leave him in. It's as simple as that. Don't overmanage. Don't worry about analytics. Think about gut. That's why I think Chuck Tanner was extremely underrated. Billy Martin went by gut, but let's just stick with Chuck Tanner. Chuck Tanner would do whatever, okay, even in the regular season, but postseason, he was brilliant. He used gut, okay, and he was great at it. Whoever's hot, leave them in. Gut instincts, don't worry about the analytics. But I think Terry Collins, John, I always forget the pitcher's name, the Dark Knight.
Brian Harvey. He went to go take him out.
And Harvey looked him dead in the eye and said, Coach, I want to stay in. I can get this next guy. Dick Williams did it with Goose Goss and San Diego. No, it didn't work out. But I didn't blame Collins. I didn't blame Dick Williams. I did the same thing years ago. My starting pitcher was better at 70%, Chris and John, and to our fans, than our bullpen was at 100%. We were winning 7-0, then 7-2, then 7-5. We lost 8-7. I could sleep at night because I went with my best. If you have a great bullpen, if you had a Mariano Rivera, a Kenta Colvey, a Goose Gossage, or whoever, sure. But you don't. Leave in your starter, or again, whoever is hot, leave them in.
You're around these managers all the time, John. And it strikes me that if we're talking about a manager who is more likely to go with his gut in this series and maybe walk out to the mound mid-5th, mid-6th to take the ball from a starting pitcher, but gets the stare down and the look back a la Matt Harvey and Terry Collins back in the day, it would very much be an Aaron Boone, Garrett Cole kind of moment, maybe even in Game 1 on Friday night, where Garrett, we've both interacted with Garrett, certainly. You have a lot more than I. We both know if Garrett's out there and feels like, okay, I've put these guys on, damn it, Aaron, you're going to let me get these guys. You're going to let me get these next 2 outs and let me work out of this or whatever it may be, whatever the situation is. I think, if we're looking for a guy who may try to manage this series more by gut and more, I wouldn't say unconventionally by today's standards, as Claudio's alluding to, with so much bullpen usage, it would be Boone and the Yankees.
I think you're right. And I mean, the Yankees at least have the advantage here of having 4 starting pitchers lined up for the series. The Dodgers are so thin. They've used 40 pitchers this year, 40, and got to the World Series. And they're down to 3 starting pitchers. That's why they went to a bullpen game. In a perfect world, they wouldn't have to use bullpen games in the World Series, which they're going to do either in Games 3 or 7 or in Game 4, depending on how they, deploy Walker Buehler. But yeah, I think it definitely the advantage there swings to the Yankees as far as guys who have the experience and want the ball. Cole will fight you. He could give up 8 runs in 2 innings, and he won't admit that he doesn't have it that day. He doesn't want to come out of the game. And I say that affectionately because I think that's something that makes Garrett Cole great. Carlos Rodon, another guy, he'll fight you to come out of the ball game. Now, Clark Schmidt and Luis Seal, they probably would want to fight you, but they don't have a whole lot of time in the big leagues, so they can't show up their manager on the mound. But I agree, and I think I think Aaron Boone, I think he is more likely to defer, especially to Cole and Rodon, if they both convince him that they still feel good to keep him in the game. Or Dave Roberts, and it's not a knock on Dave Roberts because he's got him all the way to the World Series with a 3-man rotation. I think Doc Roberts is more apt to take you out quicker. And, they've had 3 bullpen games in the playoffs. And as much as the traditionalist in me hates to say that use a bullpen game in the playoffs, the realist today is 2 of the 3 times it worked out great. So, you really can't knock the Dodgers for that. And, it's really worked for them here in the postseason.
Claudio, we've managed to talk about this series now for about 20 minutes. And it's remarkable. We haven't even mentioned the biggest X factor, which is, I think, Shohei Ohtani. The guy's got an OPS up around 930 something, near 1,000. We just lost Claudio, John. I'll get back to him on this one. But, we haven't talked about Ohtani yet. I mean, this is the guy who can take over the series at any point in time. There were a couple moments in the NLCS where it felt like, okay, this thing's done because Ohtani has arrived. Is that the biggest X factor here? Soto's looked like it for the Yankees, certainly to this point in the postseason. Just as you evaluate what we're about to see here on the morning of Game 1, what is the biggest X factor? What do you think pushes this in one direction or another?
I think Ohtani's definitely a biggest X factor. And I mean, as much as the spotlight has been on him since the day he made his big league debut with the Angels 6 years ago, whatever it was now. The spotlight's brighter on him than ever in this series. I mean, this is why the Dodgers gave him the record contract, $700 million. It was to get them to the World Series and win a World Series. Now, he's had a good postseason, not a great postseason. He hasn't been as dominant as he was at times in the regular season. But I really think he's going to step up. I think he really enjoys these kind of moments. And I think that I think if he has the type of series where he can take the Dodgers and carry them on his shoulders, which he is certainly more than capable of doing, then I really like the Dodgers' chances. And it's going to be fun. And, it might not be fair for one player to get all the spotlight, but he's such a unique player, even though he isn't pitching this year because he had Tommy John surgery on his elbow. I mean, to be one of the top 10 pitchers in the game and maybe the best hitter, I mean, this is unprecedented. I mean, even I know everyone says Babe Ruth, but Babe Ruth only pitched and played the outfield full time only 2 years in his career. Ohtani's been doing this for over a half a decade.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Claudio, we were just talking about, we lost you for a second, but we were just talking about Ohtani and how he's got to be the biggest X factor in this series because he can take over a game and the entire series for that matter in just a couple of at-bats. We saw it in the NLCS a couple of times. The ability to change a game with one swing of his bat or, add to a lead. It goes from being a game at 5-2 in the 7th inning of a ball game to, okay, this guy takes a massive cut and now it's a 6-run ball game because he seems to be the master of the 3-run homer as well, while also being remarkable on the mound once he gets back there, as John was talking about. Is it Ohtani for you you would consider the X factor in this series, or where else are you looking as the Yankees and Dodgers get ready to start this thing tonight?
Well, first of all, about Ohtani, and I'm not always trying to go to be a lone wolf. He does have a hole in his swing, okay? Outside corner. Pitch him high and tight and get him low, anything outside, because if you notice, he does yank that front side out. He wants to yank the ball 500 feet to right field, okay? And when he does that, that exposes what? The outside part of the plate, a backdoor slider, anything outside. Okay, set him up. Throw him high and tight a little bit or inside. Now, you can't miss. I'll say that. You can't miss. But you again, Vince Lombardi used to say the greatest feeling in the world is to lie exhausted in victory. The second greatest feeling in the world is to lie exhausted in defeat. But let me go back to another thing. Lennox Lewis, when he fought a big slugger named David Tua, one punch and you were out from David Tua. I said back then, I do a boxing TV show. I said, Lennox Lewis, every single round, he has to not only be tired physically, but mentally. And then when he lost to Rock Rahman, he slipped up for 1 second. Rahman caught him. He lost his belt. With Otani, you have to focus in on him. You have to hit that outside corner. There's no doubt that his statistics, his success can be limited by banging him on the outside part of the plate. That's number one. As far as the other hitters are concerned, I'm telling you, the guys who go pole to pole, now the Dodgers don't chase. They don't strike out as much as the Yankees do. So, but they do have Betts. I think Betts is big time. Edman, I like Edman a lot. Okay, I think he's dangerous. So, don't just focus on Otani. There's a lot of good. Miguel Rojas, I like him. And I'm going to tell you guys something. I know John's tired of hearing this, and maybe our listeners. Chris, you haven't listened to me yet. I do a lot of hitting things, right? Watch Stanton. Watch Judge. Watch anybody. When they stay closed, what do I mean by that? I don't mean a closed stance. When their logo, Yankees, Dodgers, if a righty is up, when that right-handed hitter, if his logo is facing the shortstop or third base, he ain't going to hit the ball, okay? Otani, Dodgers, when his logo is at the second baseman or the first baseman, he can be had in the outside part of the corner because you lose plate coverage, you lose power, okay, and your head pulls off. So there are holes in these swings. But the guys who are pole to pole, I mean, watch Rojas. He had some nice hits. Judge, when he's on, Stanton does it all the time. But Stanton sometimes will collapse a little bit and bounce and make that ball move. There's little things that will mess him up. But back to the Dodgers. Again, I think Betts and Edmonds are and Rojas. And Muncy's another guy who comes up big in the World Series. He's a slugger, okay, and he's dangerous. Muncy's very dangerous when he's up.
Yeah, talk about constructing rosters. Muncy off the scrap heap from Oakland a few years ago, and obviously Edman at the trade deadline this year has been clutch. If you're looking for a dark horse MVP candidate, he is certainly one. He's gotten hot during these playoffs. I'll put you on the spot, Claudio. I'll get to you in a second, John, but I'll put you on the spot and ask you, how does this thing play out? Give me a prediction. Dodgers, Yankees, how many games?
When you ask an NFL coach, how are you guys going to win? Well, if we run the ball, protect the quarterback, and the quarterback's accurate, our defense stops the other team, and special team. Well, hell yeah, right? Of course. Now, who has the better shot to do this? Number one, I give the managerial advantage to Boone by a lot. Okay. Pitching, as John alluded to, starting pitching. Dodgers, I'm going to go with the Yankees. The bullpen, and I don't mean to. Don't take this personal. And we've seen Clay Holmes here in Pittsburgh. Yep. Don't use Clay Holmes. He scares the hell out of me. Don't use him. Okay. The bullpen, I'm going to give a little bit of advantage to the Yankees. I like Weaver. I like the fact that Boone will steal a base here and there. Another thing that I would do, not to answer your question. Remember years ago when St. Louis played Detroit in the World Series, St. Louis would lay a few bunts down, and Detroit couldn't field. They couldn't field them. They couldn't throw them. Why? They weren't used to it. Okay. Neither team, whoever plays a little more small ball, whoever doesn't try to go for the pump all the time. Okay. Like Judge, he cannot afford to hit $161. Okay. He's going to have to come up big. And again, the pole-to-pole guys. I think the Yankees have a few more pole-to-pole guys. And I learned this in '86 when Mike Scott and the Astros were just dominating the great Mets hitters, especially Mike Scott. That's when it hit me. You know what? They're right. Great pitching does stop great hitting. But then they say great hitting stops good pitching. But I'm going to give the advantage to the Yankees because I think the pitching is going to come through. I think Boone's going to have a great series. And I think the little guys, the Volpe's going to have a nice series. It's the Soto. We haven't talked about Soto. Soto's big time. He's going to have a great series. Torres, I'm not so sure about him. He can be pitched to because he's hanging on that back leg. If you pitch him properly and get him off balance, he won't be worth much. But I'm telling you, Jazz Chisholm is another one. I said when John and I first started the show, I said, whoever picks up Jazz Chisholm is going to win the World Series. So my two dark horse MVPs for this series are going to be, I'm going to go with Chisholm. I'm not going to say so much Volpe, but I'm going to go with Chisholm being the MVP. Yankees series.
How many? Give me games. 6, 7?
TV's hoping for 8. I'm going to say 7 games. I'm going to say 7 games.
All right, Yankees in 7, Jazz Chisholm MVP. I'm gonna go the other way, to be honest. I think we get a split in the first 2 games in LA, and then a big performance by Walker Buehler in Game 3 in the Bronx. And I think, some of that small ball stuff has worked. You got guys who are capable of it in the Dodgers lineup as well. Betts can hit to all fields. Tommy Edman, who we've been talking about, so maybe a sneaky Tommy Edman MVP, and the Dodgers in 7. John, what do you think? It's the morning of Game 1. We've gone either way here. Claudio's on the Yankees. I think that Boone is an advantage over Roberts, but I've gone Dodgers. Where do you fall down?
I think it's going to go 7 games, and I think it's a very intriguing matchup. I mean, we alluded to earlier, the 2 most marquee franchises in the game, and I mean, 2 of the most famous professional sport franchises in the world head to head. There's so much star power in this series on both sides, and I really think it's going to be a great series. And I think in the end, I think the Dodgers are going to win in 7. I think the home field advantage is real for them. If you've been in Dodger Stadium, I mean, the sound system is ear-splitting there. And when the Dodgers get rolling, it's an intimidating place to play. It really is not. The Yankee Stadium isn't either, because it is. But, I think a lot of people think, well, it's L.A., it's Southern California, the fans are laid back. Well, it's not like that so much anymore at Dodger Stadium. I mean, it's really, really an intimidating place to play. And if you get to a Game 7, which I think it will, I think it'll be very tough for the Dodgers, or I should say the Yankees, to try to win in that environment in a winner-take-all game. So I'm going to go with the Dodgers by the slimmest of margins in 7 games. But I would be highly disappointed if this doesn't turn out to be one of the better World Series in recent memories.
Yeah, I think it's going to live up to a lot of the hype. I got to thank both of you for going on the clock with us here at Draft Nation. Another edition of Real Baseball Talk. John's got some great stuff on both teams at draftnation.com. Claudio, as always, the head coach at Carnegie Mellon. Thank you for taking the time today as well. We'll catch up with both of you gentlemen very soon. Enjoy the World Series, everybody. This has been Real Baseball Talk with John Perrotto and Claudio Reilsono here on Draft Nation. Great stuff, guys. That was awesome.
That was fun. That was fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Blacked out there for a minute. I just had to change rooms.
No, you're good. You're good. We went right over that speed bump and kept on going.
I got some for you guys might like here. I don't know if you can see it or not. Look at this. That's 1973. It was my first game I ever went to. A calendar, August 19th, 1970.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Ramp up Joe Namath.
That's
kind of stuff here. I got a Three River. I love Three River Stadium, as you can see.
Yeah.
Hey, look, I got my Yankee pennant, so you know I was going to go for the Yankees. My dad came over from Italy. This lady who my grandfather worked for gave him listen to this, a Yankee wool shirt, no number in the back, with the small brim hat. That thing, and somebody threw it away. My dad kept that thing for years. Somebody that would have been worth a lot of money.
Yeah.
But but my dad grew up with the Yankees, and my uncle used to work at Three River Stadium, Chris, and so ever since I was 8, I used to go to every Sunday. I used to go to locker rooms. So I was a huge, humongous Pirate fan. Still friends with a lot of those guys. Unfortunately, they've kind of soured just the whole thing. But I'm still going for the Yankees, more for the laundry, as they say.
Yeah. Rooting for the laundry. No, I came up at Three Rivers too, watching the teams in the late 80s and early 90s. So I definitely have that soft spot for that old dump too. But
I loved it.
Yeah. Well, great stuff, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time. And
enjoy your work, Chris. John,
thank you very much.
Isn't bad either. Okay,
well, I do what I can,
Yes, you're the best.
Guys, it was really good working together. I enjoyed it. I thought we had really good chemistry and good energy here.
So. Yeah, both of you were great. Thank you so much.
said my last name right, which is good.
Just got to throw a little Paisan in there. I did my best.
You did good.
All right, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too, Chris.
All right, I'll see you.
See you, Claudio.
See you, John.